This is Kai Hagen with Eye on Our Community. Here this evening with two guests for the first time. We have two guests from the Board of Education. We have Brad Young and Elizabeth or Liz Barratt. You let me know if you have a preference. Who are both two of the 7 members of the Frederick County Board of Education. For those who are not aware, we did just have an election. I presume you know that. But the Board of Education elects people in 2 staggered terms of 4 years each. So there are 7 members of the Board of Education, and 4 of them are elected in one election cycle, and 3 of them, every other election cycle. So this year, there were 4 members of the Board of Education up for re-election, 3 that have another 2 years in their term. 2 of the 4 that were elected this year are with us, and Brad was re-elected, so he's been a sitting member of the board, and Elizabeth Barratt, or Liz, was elected as a new candidate, replacing someone who was occupying the seat for quite some time but did not run again this time around. So anyway, welcome to both of you. Take a moment to say hello and anything else you'd like.
Thanks, Kai, for having us here this evening. And as you said, we just finished up our election cycle, and the good thing is now that's behind us, and our job now is to start working on the future of what we're going to be doing the next 4 years, and hopefully for a lot longer at the Board of Education. And I hope we'll get into talking about, and I know Liz is one of her big subjects on the campaign with strategic planning, and we're in the process of doing that, and I hope we can have some discussions on that and where we're heading in the future.
And welcome, Liz.
Thank you. It's great to be here this evening. I am glad the campaign is over, and like Brad said, really, really eager to start the work. I'm about a week in to my term here, and I've got a lot to learn, but I am specifically interested in making sure our strategic plan gives us the direction and the room to support our 40,000 kids, our staff, and our family and our community. So I'm excited to do that work. 40,000
kids, and as many people know, roughly, give or take, depending, but roughly half of the Frederick County budget. School budget gets funded from the county, from the state, some from other sources. We might jump right in with one of the issues that is going to be coming up because the budget process is already beginning. Just a little bit of background for our listeners. The new county executive is charged with drafting a budget that will not go to the county council, the new county council, until about April for their input, although she fully intends to have an inclusive process that includes them in that discussion, well before then, and helps to negotiate something that they are a part of prior to that. But the very first public hearing, which is not with a draft budget, but is just a preliminary hearing to sort of hear from the community, from stakeholders, from a wide variety of people with an interest in that, what their concerns are, what their suggestions are, is what, next week?
Next Wednesday, 7 o'clock.
Where is that?
I believe that's at Winchester Hall.
So it's not like some of the larger budget hearings where they expect hundreds of people and have it at the high school, but you can fit 235 people in there. So.
You can, and unfortunately for us, it's because of the tight timing and Jan getting her new government started, we unfortunately have a board meeting that same evening, and I think there's a few other events. So I know as a board we're going to send over a representative with comments of what our views are on things. We unfortunately will not be there because we have our own board meeting. But we will be trying to work collaboratively with Jan and the new council on coming up with a budget to adequately fund what our needs are in the upcoming future.
And no doubt, the Board of Education, while it may be nice if you could sit there individually, is going to have many opportunities through an ongoing process to speak with Jan and her folks. And in fact, one of the very first appointments that Jan has made as part of her new administration as she tries to figure out how that's all going to work, because again, we're not just electing a new administration. We're electing a new administration in a new form of government and trying to figure out a lot about the changes. And one of those changes is that Jan has appointed Janice Spiegel to be, I don't know what the official title is, liaison to
Educational liaison.
Education liaison. Yeah. So broadly speaking, not just to the Board of Education, but that will obviously be a significant focus for her. In fact, I don't think, have you even had a meeting yet to which she has attended?
She came to our first She came to our first work session last week. I think the other thing that's happening right now that's exciting is, Jan also ran talking a lot about education, not just funding, but a vision for education. And I think, Brad and Joy Schaefer, who is also on our board, are on Jan's education leadership team. And I think this sort of cohesion that's going to be developed is not only with Janice's position, but with Jan's vision for education is really going to be great in terms of coming together around education as a priority for our county. So
I was going to mention the leadership team. There are a few initial leadership teams that Jan set up that are intended to be temporary to help with the building of a vision and a structure for moving forward in the new county government on certain priority issues. And one of those, clearly, as you would expect, if you've paid any attention to the campaign, is education. And as Liz mentioned, Brad, you are on that leadership team.
Yes.
How many people are part of that, and what's the structure for moving forward there?
I want to say, because they've, I think most recently, Jolie Marker was added from the PTA Council as well. Our superintendent, Dr. Teresa Aubin, is on that committee. So I think it's a floating number. Last I saw was around 10 or 11. First meeting was held last week. Next meeting is scheduled for December 23rd. And again, I think Jan intends to use that as a focus of trying to figure out where the directions are so she can strategically plan what her initiatives are for education and how to fund going forward. So I think she's looking, it's a cross-section of folks that are in the education system and folks that have been active in the community and some business folks in order to figure out what the strategic goals will be for her budget for education.
And it's important and that's a good reminder, really, that there is a lot more involved in some of the decisions that are going to have to be made than just the budget.
Right.
That there's a lot of other issues. But the budget is going to be a big one, and perhaps that would be a good thing for us to take a quick look at, and we'll probably talk about it a little now and even beyond the break. But one of the issues that has come up a lot in the campaign, of course, is that for 6 years straight now, 2 years during which the county budget was reduced by about $38 million overall, and 4 years when the county budget has been growing, Frederick County Public Schools has been at what is known as maintenance of effort, or MOE, which essentially means that it's a state formula that mandates that the floor for funding is based on a per pupil allocation will not be reduced. And so that's where we've been. And there's been a lot of concern about that. And but we're still in challenging budget times in many regards. And maybe if you could take a moment, you could start, Liz, talk a little bit about the context of that 6 years of MOE and what we're looking at in terms of where the Board of Education might be and how that discussion is going to happen with the public and with Jan and really ultimately with the council about that.
Well, I said it during the campaign, and I'll stick with it. MOE is insufficient. I think we all agree that that's true. It hasn't kept up with inflation. It hasn't kept up with growth and changes necessary to really have a good 21st century school system. It is going to be a challenging budget year. We also have a lot of unknowns right now with our state government. We don't necessarily know how Governor Hagen's funding is going to work. I think they're just starting they're really moving forward with their budget process too. I keep talking about the strategic plan because I think the more our community comes together around the priorities, we're able to really focus our funding in the right ways. And I think we've got to catch up here with teacher salaries in a significant way. As MOE affected the school system, it also affected the way we compensate our teachers and our staff members. We talk a lot about technology strategic plan. I think as we move forward with technology, we need to make sure that technology is being deployed in a way that aligns with the bigger strategic plan. And then there's care and maintenance of facilities and making sure that we have all of the resources in place to really support the objectives and the priorities in our strategic plan.
We are going to take a quick break. We'll come back in a couple of minutes. This is Eye on Our Community, and we're here today with Brad Young and Elizabeth Barratt, the president and the vice president of the Frederick County Board of Education. Back. Kai Hagen with Eye on Our Community. We're here today speaking with Brad Young and Elizabeth Barratt of the Frederick County Board of Education. We were just talking a little bit about the budget. There's a little more to talk about there. We mentioned that it's been 6 years of maintenance of effort, and there's been a lot of conversation in the community. But the last budget cycle, the Board of Education, Frederick County Public Schools, and Superintendent Albin proposed a budget that, even after trying their best to pare it down, was $17 million, to correct me if I'm wrong on the number, but about $17 million higher than the maintenance of effort number would have been and ultimately was. Obviously, that sort of represents a feeling of a deficit of investments that would like to have been able to make over the last few years. Where are we going to go this year in terms of the schools providing a budget for us to look at that represents what they really think they need, separate from sort of the other questions about where's the state going to be, where's the county going to be as a beginning of that negotiation? Do we have some sense of that at this point?
Well, our duty as a board is to propose a budget that meets the needs of our staff and students and the community, and that's always a tough task because the view of what is necessary and what is desired is different amongst different people. And in that budget, I mean, we could sit down and say we need additional guidance counselors, we'd like smaller class sizes, we'd like to have more technology, we'd like to pay our OPEB obligation, we'd like to speed up our deferred maintenance. I mean, we could come up with a budget that's just totally unrealistic. And again, necessary is making sure that we have the right staff in our schools, to make sure we have good teachers, good support staff, good administrators, and that means paying them adequately in comparison to what our peers are doing, that we have a good pay scale. One of the problems that happened with the maintenance of effort for the past 6 years, a lot of our pay lanes have been scrunched where people didn't get steps that they were intended to get. So we have periods where we have people that we hired for 5 years that are all at the same pay grade. Last year, the board worked collaboratively with our teachers union, FCTA, to develop a new pay scale that would correct some of the inadequacies that were developed because of this maintenance of effort over 6 years. The problem is that it takes quite a bit of money in order to correct it. We've already had some initial discussions with County Executive Jan Gardner about how to do that, and so that's going to be one of our priorities, is trying to find the funding to move to this new pay scale so that we can correct some of the problems that were created by having several years in a row where there were little or no pay raises, which again ended up scrunching a bunch of different years at the same pay grade. And so you had several years where new people were being hired at the same rate as what people that had already been there were being paid. So that's one of the priorities that we have, is trying to do that. Obviously, every year we have to negotiate with our unions, and one of the tough parts about this budgeting process is we have to put together a budget and request money ahead of time before we've completed negotiations with our teachers and our support staff and our administrators, and it makes it tough because we really don't know what the state or the county are going to do until they give us those indications. So it's not an easy process, but to me that's one of our priorities, is to get that new pay scale that we had developed with the unions funded, and put that into place.
So it's interesting because it raises some questions. Obviously, part of what you have expressed there, Brad, is that there are multiple points in a complicated process at which there are challenging discussions and decisions to be made about weighing competing priorities in a world of limited resources and an inability to fund all of those priorities. Right. And that's happening when the schools are trying to come up with a budget to propose. It comes up in discussions with the union where you have a situation of maybe moving some of the money around within the budget. It comes up in the discussions with the county and even ultimately with the state in terms of the level of funding that you're going to get. And a lot of those things are unclear. What you do know this year is that it's likely that people are going to work very hard to find a way to fund above maintenance of effort. We don't know exactly where that money is going to be shifted from or how that's going to happen. But it sounds like because of this backlog of years of MOE that you're going to have a situation, even if there is more money and it's less than the $17 million or whatever it would be this year, that there are going to be some hard choices to make about as you said, the list included, and I'm sure it was just a partial list, technology and OPEB and other things, teacher pay. Explain a little bit, Liz, if you could, about that process of having that discussion about weighing those competing priorities and making ultimately a decision about how that money is going to be spent.
Sure. I think there are a number of opportunities. So Jan is kicking off the process here by, inviting public engagement at her first budget and priority setting conversation next Wednesday. There will be opportunities, and the superintendent has invited the public to engage and share their priorities. She had a conversation on Tuesday. She's going to have one tonight at Walkersville. There's a Twitter conversation, I believe, on Monday or Tuesday. Obviously, the board, when we prepare our budget, the superintendent's going to prepare her recommended budget, and then we'll prepare a budget as well. There's going to be more opportunities for the public to engage. So listening at every step of the way is going to help us set those priorities. And again, the strategic plan is going to be finalized during this process. And so there are always going to be things that we're not going to be able to fund. And despite the fact the new focus on education in the county and a lot of the excitement with the election, we are going to have to make some hard choices. But I think in terms of everybody being on board with the new salary scale for teachers and staff, that's obviously a priority. I think, the way we focus on kids is making sure that they have educators that are respected and compensated as professionals, and I think our community has rallied around that priority. There's a lot to consider in terms of those other priorities that we may have to defer some more. It's not all going to happen in the first year, but it is having both the short-term vision to address the top priorities, and then that longer-term plan to make sure as money does increase, that we're able to fund those longer-term priorities.
I frequently talk about the long-term, again, strategic plan,
right,
so that hopefully the long-term vision is something you work backwards from, and in a world of limited resources and multiple choices, you're at least establishing priorities that reflect a way to move more efficiently or effectively towards that vision. Were you about to?
I just wanted to add back in. When we talk a lot about maintenance of effort, and it's important to realize that maintenance of effort is referring to the county's portion of their funding, which is approximately 50% of our total budget. As Liz said earlier, we don't know yet what the state is going to do under Governor Hagen's new budget. There's a number of things that are being proposed out there, so we may see an increase of maintenance of effort in our county funding and a decrease in our state funding that offset each other. We don't know what's going to happen yet. We hope that doesn't happen, but if that is the case, we could be looking again, even though we're getting an increase in maintenance of effort, right, at not having new funds. And so until we get those things in perspective to see where we're at, it makes it tough. So that's what we're looking at right now.
Well, there are clearly a lot of moving parts and a lot of things we don't know yet, right, that are going to be very important factors. So we're going to take a short break here. We'll be back in a couple of minutes. We're here today with Brad Young and Elizabeth Barratt of the Frederick County Board of Education. Thank you for listening.
People are talking about people. I hear them whisper. You won't believe it. They think we're lovers. Kept undercover.
Welcome back. This is Kai Hagen with Eye on Our Community. We're here for our third segment this hour with Brad Young and Elizabeth Barratt of the Frederick County Board of Education. We've talked about a few things, primarily the budget. If nothing else, we've certainly conveyed that is a complicated, time-consuming process that with a lot of moving parts, and it's a discussion that's only beginning. But what a lot of people may not always realize, I think people who pay attention day to day do, but is that really there are two budgets. There is the operating budget, which deals with, salaries and, pretty much all the day-to-day, year-to-year things. But there's also a capital budget for new schools, expanded schools, major school improvements, renovations, things like that. That is a separate budget. I know that there have It shifts from time to time, the priorities. It's basically a 6-year plan. It's what gets new schools built and old schools renovated. I want to take a moment to talk about sort of where we are with that. I know there have been some recent ribbon cutting you might want to talk about, and what's sort of coming up.
Yes, most recently our completed building was the new North Frederick Elementary, which I'm a proud alum of. I was at went through my whole elementary school career at North Frederick Elementary. We just opened that school for this school year, and it's a beautiful new building. It's our new prototype for elementary schools. So the next several schools that we build will look very similar to that building.
Which is a savings.
It's a savings. Unfortunately, the next building is going to cost a lot more than that building, even though it's the same building because of increased costs that are occurring. But the next building that's up to be built is the new elementary school in Urbana, which will be named Sugarloaf Elementary. And that will be right next to the Urbana Park, within probably a quarter mile of the existing Urbana Elementary. After that, the next up on deck is the new Frederick High School. We're in the process of going through the funding requirements of getting that done. We've already done the design. What will happen there is an entirely new building will be built behind the existing Frederick High School while the students are still in the current building. When that building's
where
complete,
the parking lot is now.
Basically where the parking lot's at now. And when that building's complete, then the existing building will be torn down and they will move into it.
And that's pretty much what just happened at North Frederick.
That's what happened at North Frederick. And a lot of times, unfortunately, a lot of people, and I know my dad is a huge on trying to save and repurpose buildings that we already have. Unfortunately, that building, Frederick High, was built in about 5 different renovations in a hodgepodge. And in order to go back and use the existing building, it would not only cost significantly more than building a new building, but basically what it would do it would mean that we would have to displace all the students out of Frederick High for about 2 years, and they would not have any community sense of being Frederick High. They'd end up in different schools or in portables or somewhere.
Kind of like what happened with Linganore, only without an Oakdale to house them.
Right. And so that we felt was the best option, and the public weighed in heavily on that, and that's what they felt was the best option as well. We also have a new planned elementary school for the west side of Frederick, which will be built on the Hagen farm off of Butterfly.
So that'll
Lane.
be in the area which now is served by Hillcrest Elementary School.
Well, it'll be in the feeder pattern that would include Waverly, Hillcrest, Orchard Grove, and a small piece of Lincoln out basically is what covers that Route 40 area. So we will have to do a redistricting after that school was built, which is never a fun thing to do and probably will be very, I don't want to say controversial, but certainly people are very passionate about what school their kids go to.
Well, and that's not hard to understand. I mean, one of the first questions that people ask when they move to a community is about the local school. They learn about the local school. When you add on top of that they may have a kid that's now in the system, has built relationships, has friends, works with certain teachers, becomes a part of a family's life. Obviously, when that gets rearranged, it's a challenge. You mentioned one of the things that was interesting when you mentioned the feeder pattern, and that is when you add a new school like the one in Urbana, Sugarloaf, you've got 2 existing elementary schools down there. They presumably bump up against other elementary school districts that are in the same or different feeder patterns. That process of redistricting, besides the sort of the politics of trying to deal with that, how does that work? Because are you taking from just the most crowded schools? Are you trying to deal with the distances and other means of travel? What are the considerations in that? Because as Brad pointed out, Liz, that is often a very controversial process.
Well, certainly this will be my first opportunity to be involved in that process. I think it's important. I've read a lot about redistricting, and I've looked at other board conversations that have happened, and I think it's important to recognize that when there's a redistricting process, the schools that are most, if you're building a new school or you're renovating or you're moving people around in one community, I think you have to have a vision for the whole county at that time. You're doing a county-wide look, so it's not just certain populations that are affected.
So the ripples of redistricting can extend beyond just the immediate feeder pattern.
And I think the benefits too, right? So if, you're alleviating a current problem, but you have to have the whole county in mind, so you're able to correct other situations, look at, bus times, look at, number of students who want to go to magnet programs or career in tech, and keep all of those things in mind. But also, I think in the process has started, it started a couple of months ago, where the communities that were most specifically affected for this West Side school have already been involved in sharing their priorities and sharing their input for the decision-making process. There are opportunities to build community engagement. Done well, I think people can really start advocating and talking about the benefits of their homeschool or some changes. And I think those community engagement things done well are really opportunities for the school system to learn and to develop that vision.
You mentioned, I think, 4 schools, including the new school that would be in that feeder pattern. Will all the kids in this particular instance stay in that same feeder pattern in terms of the middle school and the high school that they go to?
That's one of the things that we have to look at. And one of the things as a school system that you need to look at is the capacity that you have and where it's located. And communities go through maturity processes where you have a school in one area and the enrollment starts to go down because that community has gotten more mature. Right. And then the growth goes somewhere else. So we have schools in our county that have excess capacity, but because they're so far away from where the needs are, it doesn't make sense to bus them to those different buildings. So we do have to look at the whole system. I mean,
you're not going to send someone from Woodsboro to Sibyllesville just because there's capacity in Sibyllesville.
Correct.
There's a limit.
Yeah. And there are school systems that will redistrict every year. Now, I think that's a little excessive to do. And again, you don't want to have a kid have to move in elementary school every year because another school has capacity. But I think it is something that we're going to have to look at on a more periodic basis. But with the new school being added in Urbana, with the new school being added on the west side, we're definitely going to have to take a look at redistricting. And that may cause some kids to be redistricted out of one feeder pattern. And when I talk about feeder pattern, it's talking about the elementary, middle, and eventually what high school they go to. So they may end up going to ultimately a different middle or high school if we do a redistricting.
Over the last, 10, 12 years or so, I had seen an overall change in the percentage of capacity for the system. Right now we're operating at about 89, 90% capacity. That was a goal that was reached after years of working to get that number down. But it's not a number that is, as you point out, the same everywhere.
Right. And we have we have good capacity at the high school level. We have good capacity at the middle school. Our biggest priority and where we have the least capacity right now is at the elementary, primarily in the Urbana area, in the west side of Frederick area. And I think in the not too distant future, the north side of Frederick with all the new development that's been approved by the city. And when you look out on 40, if anybody's driven up Butterfly Lane recently, the 10 new big apartment buildings there is going to, I think, generate a lot of new children.
And we have formulas for estimating how many students are going to be generated by what types of housing and what areas and things like that. But we're going to take our last break, come back for our final segment in a moment. This is Kai Hagen with Eye on Our Community, and we're talking today with Brad Young and Elizabeth Barratt of the Frederick County Board of Education. Welcome back. This is Kai Hagen with Eye on Our Community. We're speaking today with Brad Young and Elizabeth Barratt of the Frederick County Board of Education. This is our last segment, and if there's anything that's clear, it's that there's a lot of things we could talk about more or talk about at all that we haven't had time for, and I look forward to having both of you and other members of the Board of Education, Frederick County Public Schools, on in the future to dive into some of those issues more deeply. One issue that has been receiving growing attention, and I know, Liz, that it's something you've been involved in outside of your new position and your capacity, is the issue of sort of poverty in the community, and which relates in terms of what you all are dealing with day to day in your role, and that is poverty in Frederick County Public Schools. I think one recent article said something, I can't even remember the number, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but upwards of 20% or more of the students in elementary school being below the poverty line. Am I right about that?
Yeah, of the 40,000 or so kids in the system, over 11,000 live at or below the poverty line.
So more than 25%.
Yeah, about 26%.
And they're in a spectrum below that line, but obviously that's a significant concern. It provides both real challenge in terms of education. These kids are coming up through the system. They're spending many hours every day. They're coming from very different sets of circumstances and dealing with different kinds of challenges. We don't have a lot of time to get into it, but if we could perhaps touch a little bit on how does the school system approach that in terms of I don't want to even call it a responsibility, but the opportunity that it has to try to take that into account, to understand it and have some sort of a positive impact on that problem in our community.
Yeah, for so long, I think, students arrive at school with all of the things that they bring from home, and they arrive prepared or not prepared, based on any number of challenges that they're facing at home or other challenges. But the school system has always, the role of the school system is not to fix poverty, but the school system has always had to absorb all of the effects, anything from extra tutoring to, our homeless student coordinators handing out shoes and pants and helping children find placement. So
to food and nutrition programs,
food and nutrition
issues,
absolutely.
Discipline in the classroom.
Yeah, any number of things. And, I just read an article the other day about schools that are actually opening food pantries. We've got weekend backpack food programs in Frederick. And so the goal of the school system is really student achievement and making sure students learn. And so all of the things that have to be added to make sure that happens are huge. And so we have this opportunity, and I think, to listen to Jan's speech during her swearing in, to really acknowledge the issue of poverty. I think there is a groundswell of acknowledgement of the problem, and also the realization that the school system can work together with nonprofits, with the business community, and certainly with our new county government to make sure that we are addressing the problem collectively and strategically and with great passion, recognizing that we are going to have opportunity gaps. Our students are not, these 26% of students and other students who are affected by other gaps are not going to be achieving, and we're not going to be able to fulfill our mission until we're really addressing these things together. And I think, so it's a huge challenge, it's a huge opportunity, but it's a way for us to come together right now. And so I think we're all eager to really, really address this.
Yeah, I see the school system as a facilitator in the processes. Let's say we don't have the money or even the staffing to fix the problem or address it, but what we do have is the ability to know who our students are and know that there's a number of those that are in need, and work with these outside nonprofits, with the government, whomever it might be, in order to provide the services and get the services to them. And so I was talking with Liz yesterday. My Rotary Club does a great program, which is we sponsored a group called it's for people that need free dentist services. So we have over several thousand people in the community that can't afford dental work. And so if students are coming into school and they have a abscessed tooth or they're sick because of something wrong in their mouth, they're not going to perform as well. Is that our problem? Not necessarily, because we're there to educate them, but it affects our ability to do that. So working and identifying those students that need medical assistance, need dental work, need to eat. If they come to school and they haven't eaten, they're not going to do as well. So again, if they're not in a proper home that's warm and having the right clothing, those things are not our responsibility, but they do affect the student's ability to learn. So us helping facilitate nonprofits to address those problems will increase their learning potential in the classroom.
It's interesting because even in this very short part of the conversation where we've talked about this even just a little bit, I mean, one of the things that's clear is that it's a whole system. Right? Everything is connected. One piece of it, from funding to challenges to poverty issues to all these affect everything else in different ways, and that's part of sort of what we have to get a handle on. And you see it, for example, in the growing immigrant community in the county how we deal with, say, English as a second language. And I know there have been issues with whether or not we're adequately providing enough teachers for that. I don't know if we could touch on that just for a moment and then take a moment to wrap up, but as an example of how we're challenged.
Well, again, we use this 25% number, but the realities are it's not evenly spread. We have schools where, like Hillcrest, that are 90% students are free and reduced lunch. That school and Waverly and some of the other schools that have higher degrees of poverty and of students that don't speak English as their first language, we've provided and continue to provide additional assistance by having smaller classrooms, by providing additional teachers in those schools. Is it enough? Probably not. But again, we do everything we can to give assistance to those schools that have the most needs.
Well, actually, I think it would be good to have at another future show a more in-depth look at some of the challenges that relate to poverty, to other things that provide additional challenges, and really force the system to kind of stretch to deal with those things effectively within the constraints of, what is expected or reasonable to expect of a school system. We have about 2 minutes left.
Yes.
I know there's other news, things that have been happening in the county. Perhaps take a moment to share some of them or talk about anything else you'd like.
Real quickly, I just want to add, I had the honor and pleasure Wednesday of going down to the State Board of Education and seeing Kemptown Elementary be named one of Maryland's Blue Ribbon schools. This year, only 6 schools in the state of Maryland received that distinction out of over 1,000 schools. In Frederick County's history of the Blue Ribbon program, which is about 30 years old, we've only had 10 schools that have received that distinction. The Blue Ribbon schools means they're the top of the top. They have high academic performance. They have done everything they can to use the resources they have to make it an outstanding school. So we're extremely proud of Kemptown Elementary and Principal Canning and what they've done down there, the students, the faculty, the staff, the parents, the community. It isn't a school without the community, and to be acknowledged as a Blue Ribbon school is quite an honor, so we're extremely proud of Kemptown.
Well, congratulations to Kemptown Elementary School and to Frederick County Public Schools for that achievement. One of many different kinds of awards that Frederick County has garnered over the last few years. Liz, is there anything you'd like to add at the end here?
No, thanks for having me this evening. It's been a week since I took office, and I am excited for the chance to coordinate and collaborate with this board, collaborate with our great staff and teachers, and serve the students. We have a ton of challenges, but it's such an exciting time in Frederick County right now. We can, reinvigorate vision and strategy, and I'm eager to be a part of that. It's going to be hard work, but I think we're going to make great progress.
May you live in interesting times. This is an interesting time in Frederick County. I thank both of you for coming here. We've had speaking with Brad Young and Elizabeth Barratt of the Frederick County Board of Education. This is Kai Hagen with Eye on Our Community, and we thank you for listening.